He waged a 3-year war for his brothers-in-arms, toppling the tyrant's throne. Yet, as he grieved the loss of his child, the brother he trusted most quietly crowned himself king. What shattered him further was discovering that the traitor who betrayed military secrets, nearly dooming his entire army, was his beloved wife. This episode recounts the true story of the only time in British history a king was executed. The story begins with Sir Thomas Fairfax, the hero who led the people to victory in the Civil War, riding home. His heart is heavy with reflection. He believes all crowns corrupt those who wear them. To ensure the people were treated justly by their king, he led an army against his own countrymen in a brutal civil war that lasted 3 years. Now, the war is won. The king is imprisoned in a London palace, but the people have paid a terrible price. The battlefield, once a homeland, is now a wasteland. Muddy earth, littered with blood-soaked drums and the severed limbs of soldiers. Fairfax had thought he could heal the nation, but the road to reform is far longer and darker than he imagined. Amid the ruins, surviving soldiers carry the bodies of their comrades. The air reeks of death. As they handle the corpses, they discover one soldier still clings to life. They call for help and carry the wounded man away for treatment. Doctors tend to the injured in makeshift conditions, their screams of pain filling the air. Fairfax's second-in-command, Cromwell, orders the prisoners brought forward. Suddenly, an assassin disguised as a prisoner lunges at Cromwell. That night, a mysterious woman arrives at the camp. She claims to be a messenger sent by Anne, Fairfax's wife. Fairfax is startled. He thought Anne was still at their estate in Yorkshire. The woman reveals she is Anne herself, weary of waiting. She has come to the camp because the war has kept them apart for 3 long years. In the chaos of war, their reunion is a rare moment of warmth. Late that night, Anne cannot sleep. Outside the tent, she encounters a man who is also awake, Cromwell. She learns that since the assassination attempt on Fairfax, Cromwell has stood guard every night to protect him. Anne asks why he sacrifices his sleep. Cromwell replies that Fairfax is God's chosen, and as his second-in-command, it would be troublesome if anything happened to him. His words, though pragmatic, reveal a deep bond of brotherhood. The war finally ends, and the army returns in triumph. The people of London line the streets cheering Fairfax's name. He embraces Anne amid the jubilant crowds. Meanwhile, the king watches the celebration from a window above.
Your Majesty, step away from the window.
Members of Parliament like Hollies focus only on celebrating and dividing the spoils, avoiding real reform. Cromwell demands to know when the soldiers' pay will be issued. Hollies evades the question, citing other pressing debts. Cromwell angrily points out that their so-called treaty is nothing but a free trade certificate, with no mention of legal reforms or protections for the people's basic freedoms. He challenges Hollies. If they lack the courage to write these protections into law, he will do it himself. Fairfax supports Cromwell, insisting the king's power must be curbed. No one wants another war. Elsewhere, Anne's father, a royalist nobleman, pays a late-night visit. He condemns Fairfax as a traitor and warns that if he continues down this path, the entire family will have no future. He describes the state of London, the homes of royalists ransacked, the streets overrun by rebel soldiers. His words leave Fairfax in silent contemplation. The weight of family pressure and the filth of politics have left the general exhausted, both in body and spirit. Soon after, Thomas and Cromwell bring the revised peace terms to King Charles. The king remains as arrogant as ever, mockingly guessing the contents of the terms, nothing more than stripping him of his power and armories. Cromwell responds firmly, "Abusing power to plunder the people's wealth has never been a king's right." The king attempts to drive a wedge between them, recalling how he personally knighted Thomas years ago, and sneers that he has been lured by the cheap honors of the rebels. Thomas remains unmoved. He states that if the king would only become a true king again, he would still serve him. Cromwell, however, delivers an ultimatum. If the king cares at all for his broken nation, he must sign the treaty. The king asks for time to consider and, as they leave, pointedly suggests that Thomas's wife might visit him. Not long after, Thomas and Anne are invited to Cromwell's countryside estate. There, Anne suffers from constant nausea and discovers, to her joy, that she is pregnant. The prospect of new life fills Thomas with renewed hope and a sense of responsibility for the future. Yet, a vast conspiracy is brewing in the shadows. MP Halls is secretly summoned by the king, who promises to appoint him chief royal counselor if he helps restore the monarchy. Greed clouds Hollis's judgment, and he agrees.
But if you were to command my officers, Mr. Hollis, as chief royal counselor, second only to the king, that would be a different prospect, would it not?
I believe your grace will wish to withdraw that remark when he sees how it might be improperly interpreted.
He gathers his allies and plots to steal from the royal treasury. Under cover of night, they loot the palace jewels, intending to use the wealth to buy influence and overturn Parliament's decisions. After learning of Anne's pregnancy, Thomas grows anxious about the future. He fears his rebellion will bring disaster upon his unborn son. Meanwhile, Parliament is voting on the king's fate. Hollis brazenly proposes a restoration ceremony for the king in 2 days, effectively surrendering the fruits of the war. Cromwell erupts in fury, accusing Hollis of striking a traitor's deal with the king.
This is how Parliament works. We fight long, bloody years for justice. And when the king stamps his foot and says he will not play, we give up all we've earned. We will not vote on this!
Mr. Cromwell! What are you plotting, Hollis? Did the king turn your feeble bowels to jelly? Or did you strike some Judas deal?
You would shed blood! Risk other men's lives! Some of you your own, yet you dare not reform the king!
Yet, swayed by money, most MPs choose betrayal, and Hollis's proposal passes. Thomas and Cromwell soon uncover the truth behind the stolen palace jewels. They realize their victory has been sold out by these politicians. Enraged, Cromwell storms into the palace and, in front of Anne, demands the king admit to bribing Hollis. The king scoffs, declaring himself a monarch by divine right, beyond Cromwell's instruction.
And if you expect to buy back the crown with your pirate's gold, you're not only a thief and a whoremaster, but a fool.
Is that so? I think your mother omitted something from your early education, Mr. Cromwell. Most men learn in the cradle that I am the king, by divine appointment, and will not be taught good government by you!
Furious, Thomas leads his troops through the king's secret tunnels and finds the hidden treasure. With evidence in hand, Thomas is determined to purge the traitors from Parliament. He addresses his army, exposing the MPs' betrayal. He calls for one final march, not for war, but to awaken the nation and fulfill their unfinished mission.
I must ask you for one last march. Not war, not bloodshed. One brief call to wake the nation. Shall we crawl home in meek silence because they wish us to? No! Or finish what we started? Victory will be ours!
Anne, learning of her husband's plan, fears for their unborn child's future. She confronts Thomas, asking what kind of future he is building for their son. Moved by her pleas, Thomas relents. He decides to spare Hollis, exiling him instead as punishment. He writes a secret letter warning Hollis to flee to France immediately, hoping that one day Hollis might repay this mercy by becoming a friend to his son. Hollis flees London with his wife that very night. The next day, Thomas and Cromwell lead their troops to surround the Parliament building. They storm the chamber, dissolving Parliament in the name of national security and arresting all conspirators.
For the safety of the kingdom, this house is disbanded. The following members will accompany my officers.
But in the prison cells, Cromwell finds no trace of Hollis. He realizes instantly there is a traitor among their own ranks. He storms out of the dungeon and publicly confronts his men, demanding to know who let Hollis escape. Thomas intervenes just in time, lying that Hollis fled after catching wind of the investigation. At this moment, Cromwell makes a decision that shocks Thomas. He announces his intention to put the king on public trial. Thomas makes one last attempt to persuade the king, urging him to accept Parliament's terms in exchange for peace. But the king remains obstinate.
Lord General Fairfax.
He mocks Thomas, warning that if divine right is abolished, Thomas's noble title and inheritance will vanish. He threatens that Thomas's son will be nothing more than a commoner and hopes Anne understands the sacrifices her husband is making for his so-called ideals.
Doubts the sanctity of your king, and you cannot by that reasoning think your own bloodline divinely privileged.
Even if some hypocrisy on your part allowed the Fairfax line to continue, I shall not grant it.
The king's arrogance finally pushes Thomas over the edge. He tears up the agreement, sealing the king's fate.
No man commands a king. No man tells a king his limits. A king rules by God's grace. Now get out.
Thomas returns home and reluctantly agrees to Cromwell's plan to try the king, but he insists the trial's purpose is only to force a public confession from the king, exile at most, not abdication. Anne, however, sees through Cromwell's ambition. She knows things will not end so simply. Soon, Cromwell captures one of Hollis's accomplices and extracts a confession under torture. He learns the full extent of the king's conspiracy with Hollis. Without consulting Thomas, Cromwell executes the accomplice.
This is reform.
We are not butchers, Oliver. This is not war!
Is that so, Tom? When did it end? I must have missed it.
Then, tragedy strikes. Anne, overwhelmed by stress and grief, loses the child she was carrying. Thomas is devastated, and for the first time, he questions his choices. Cromwell visits to offer condolences, but Thomas remains silent. Meanwhile, royalists risk their lives to visit Anne. They tell her that Cromwell's reign of terror has filled the nation with resentment. They hint that the exiled prince is watching the situation closely and warn Anne that Thomas's actions will bring ruin upon their family. They beg her to help them visit the king, if only to show sympathy. Torn and in pain, Anne ultimately agrees. With the royalists' help, the king escapes his confinement. He attempts to flee to France to rally support and reignite the war. Though he is quickly recaptured, Cromwell discovers a letter on a messenger, a personal note from the king inciting rebellion. He immediately confronts Anne.
What moves you most, Anne? Your love of Tom or your hatred of me?
Why do you think I hate you?
I underestimated you, Anne. I see there are two generals in this house.
When Thomas returns home, he questions his wife, and Anne breaks down. She sobs that she tried to embrace her husband's new world, only to watch everything she cherished be destroyed. She says all that remains around her are people warning that her husband could die at any moment. Thomas finally realizes this revolution has cost him far too much. The day of the king's trial arrives. Cromwell presents the death warrant, signed by all the judges, except Thomas. In court, the king defiantly declares himself a monarch by divine right, beyond the judgment of any earthly law. He argues that he represents the freedom of the English people more than any so-called judge in the room. Yet the court convicts him of treason and murder.
By choice, sound reasoning and proven honesty, which is a fairer method than that by which you became king.
Thomas leaves London with Anne. Cromwell's allies suggest arresting Thomas.
We must surely seize the general before he reaches his noble friend.
Or bring him back to control the troops.
He's a traitor! He could raise a troop to ride against us.
I shall be general now.
On the day of the execution, the king walks calmly to the scaffold.
Disturbance can be none at all. Remember. Await my sign.
As the axe falls, the only monarch in British history to be publicly executed meets his end. Cromwell declares to the people using the king's blood as a symbol that they are no longer subjects but free citizens in control of their own destiny.
With this you are subjects no more, but citizens, free men. You do not have to kneel to any other man. You are your own masters, commanding your own fate.
Thomas seeks out Cromwell. When Cromwell sees Thomas, he admits that building a nation is not as glorious as it seems. The ministers keep asking foolish questions and cannot provide reasonable solutions. Cromwell insists that his actions are not for honor, but for the freedom of the people. But Thomas tells him that without a king, no one can rule the country.
I thought you'd left me for sure.
That night, Hals suddenly appears at Thomas's home. He says the exiled prince has taken good care of them, and the prince even knows that Thomas did not sign the king's death warrant. Hals explains his purpose for coming. He knows Thomas can influence Cromwell's decisions. He hopes Thomas will change Cromwell and use the law to restrain him. Thomas refuses, but he grows increasingly concerned about Cromwell's dictatorial rule. The next day, Cromwell's confidants report that Hals has been seen returning. To consolidate his power, Cromwell announces he will hold an inauguration ceremony. Thomas realizes Cromwell has become the very tyrant he once opposed. He finds his former subordinates and plots an assassination. At the ceremony, one of Thomas's men raises his gun, but at the last moment, Thomas saves Cromwell. He tells Cromwell that he cannot kill him, but one day someone who does not love him as he does will stop him with a gun.
I find I cannot kill you, but one day soon a man who loves you less well than I will raise his gun to stop you.
Lord Protector is but another name for king, and you are a cruel one. I wish I could believe that you will change. Listen to reason. Act with mercy. But I have seen enough of your bloodlust and contempt for men's lives to know that you will not.
Cromwell orders Thomas's arrest and commands that he be burned alive, but no one obeys his orders. In the end, Thomas leaves to the cheers of the people, while Cromwell, abandoned by all, becomes a lonely figure. Years later, Thomas receives news that Cromwell is on his deathbed. He rushes to London to see his old friend one last time. Cromwell still speaks of his grand plans to conquer the world and accuses Thomas of betraying him by not finishing the revolution together. Thomas confesses that it was he who warned Hals. He feared the revolution he started would cause his son to lose all his friends. Cromwell dies alone. 2 years later, the monarchy is restored. The new king orders Cromwell's body to be dug up and hanged on display. Thomas often thinks of Cromwell. He wonders if the outcome would have been different if he had stood by Cromwell's side all along. But in the end, he understands that to be true to himself, he had to betray the man he once deeply loved.